Hey, so today we're talking about the church in Pergamum. So the letter to the church in Pergamum in a nutshell, Jesus, the one with the double-edged sword, says he knows where they live. He knows the people are holding firm to his name, and that one of them has already paid the ultimate price for following him. He also says that he knows they've let in and tolerate people who are trying to lead them astray. They need to repent. Again, that was turning back to Christ. And he says if they do, he will give them some hidden manna and a white stone with a new name. And there's really a lot here. If you've read the Old Testament, specifically the account of the Exodus and the wandering in the wilderness, then you can see some connections here. And I'm going to have to work hard to keep this brief because I could easily go off on a few different tangents. This is another some good news, some bad news letter like Ephesus was. Here Jesus tells them that he knows where they live, and that's important because Pergamum was the center of emperor worship. They worshipped the emperor like a god. One of them had already paid the price for not conforming to emperor worship by staying faithful to Christ. As much as I'd like to talk about that, I really want to focus though on Balaam. You might remember his story because he's the one whose donkey spoke in the Old Testament. But there's a lot more to the story. So Balaam was hired by a fellow by the name of Balak to curse the Israelites. But when he found out he couldn't, he makes a fantastic statement in Numbers 23:19, which is actually one of the first verses I ever learned. It says, God is not a man who lies or a son of man who changes his mind. Does he speak and not act, or promise and not fulfill? Basically what it means is if God has decided something, then nothing and no one can stand in his way. In essence, Balaam realized that he could not curse what God had blessed. However, the people could go astray from what God had called them to. Balaam figured that if the people broke God's commandments, then he could not bless them while they were being disobedient. Now the question is what does that have to do with us? As Christians, we're not bound to the Mosaic law, but we're under grace. And that's true, but we can still be disobedient to God. And we can't expect God to bless us if we're being willfully disobedient to him. And that's what's going on here. As an example, you could think of 1 Peter 3:7, where Peter tells husbands to love their wives and respect their wives so that their prayers won't be hindered. You can be doing things that have no business with your relationship with God, and you can't expect God to bless you while you're willfully being disobedient to him and doing things that he has specifically said not to do. He's a good father, but in that he's a good father. So we have to keep that in mind. So the people in Pergamum had let in people that were trying to get them away from following God's truth. You might have heard an expression, exchanging the truth of God for a lie. And that's kind of what's being talked about here, is taking the truth of God and exchanging it for something that is less than what God has said. If you go back and think about Eve in the garden, what did Satan say to her? He said, has God said? Plant seeds of doubt in your mind to think maybe God didn't say this, or maybe this isn't the truth. And sometimes it's as simple as that, and sometimes it's just as easy as I'm going to do what I want. We can't let things in our life that take us away from the purposes and plans of God. We can let TV, music, friends, work, really just about anything come into our lives and take over our values, our morals, and our ideals. And we have to get rid of those things. It's not easy, but it's necessary. I used to go through a purge every couple of years after I got saved, and I'd go through and get rid of everything that I realized didn't belong there. But then what would happen is I would start to build things back up and add things back in, and I'd have to go through this purge again. And it was a vicious cycle because I can't tell how many times I'd get rid of things and then end up adding those same things back in. What I had to do is realize what it was that was causing me to stumble, and those things that were causing me to sin, and those things that were causing me to change my ideas, and realize those are the things I need to not let in my life. And it's going to be different for everybody, so we each have to watch our own steps. As an example, I was a huge fan of grunge growing up. I had the look, the attitude, I had the music memorized. The whole scene itself summed up what I thought about life. But I was also a bad apple, as they say. I was nasty. I was mean, and I was usually on something. So now, while I still love grunge music, it's still a part of what shaped me, I can't listen to it because it brings me to a place that I don't belong. it brings me somewhere I should never be going, and it causes me to stumble. It causes me to change the way I view things. It brings me to a kind of a depressed place too, and I can't go there. So I can't let that thing in my life because it makes me stumble. And everybody has their own things. We all have areas like that, areas that we have to guard against and protect. We can't let someone or something into our lives that takes the place of Jesus. And we can't let things into our life that are going to take us somewhere He told us not to go, and we can't expect for Him to bless us while we're there. So that's just a thought.